Hello. This is Roman of Crypto Lions, and before you is our entry into the Coding for Change virtual hackathon. It is the Kyros Certificates Hub. It is running here on certs.cryptolions.io on the Jungle testnet, which I will add we are proud to have curated for 2 years and counting. And I will be connecting to this portal using Scatter. We tried to get UBI keys working with WebAuthn, didn't quite get there, so we're still using Scatter, which is pretty widespread in the community. I will talk through the functionality, which I think you may find absurdly simple, but because it's so simple, it can be applied to many different areas, and then I will demonstrate what I think are very disparate examples of how something like this can be used to solve problems associated with COVID-19 and the quarantine. So the functionality is registering, issuing, and managing certificates. So anyone can register as an authority for licenses, diplomas, certificates, badges of approval. This can be used for theater tickets. It can be used for coupons, really wide variety of use cases. And what we like about this philosophically is that it sort of democratizes authority. In fact, we made that our motto, democratize authority. And what we mean by that is that this can be used by anyone from an institution as formal as a Department of Motor Vehicles, which believes that blockchain and EOS are better at, fighting counterfeits and ensuring that driver's licenses are authentic, or it can be used by some upstart who wants to evaluate educational programs, who wants to evaluate wines, and this upstart can compete in the marketplace of ideas to get reputation, and then maybe these badges for winemakers will be valuable, and the upstart can deliver these badges to winemakers that meet his approval or her approval, and they will be displayed proudly by those winemakers. Then there's issuing certificates, obviously. We use the simple asset standard for NFTs and digital assets. This is a standard that we ourselves created about a year ago and have been improving ever since. We are thrilled to see that it seems to have good traction. An advantage of using simple assets, aside from the fact that it packages a lot of useful functionality, is the fact that it has compatibility with other EOS infrastructure. So for example, here on blocks, there's a tab for NFTs, so people will be able to see their certificates and diplomas and stuff like that, although it doesn't seem to quite be working yet on the Jungle testnet. We have in simple assets something called a non-transferable NFT or an NTT, non-transferable token. We're using that for these certificates. We think there are some use cases where you might want to have your certificates resold, and it will be a relatively small upgrade to this prototype to give issuers the option. Like, is this something that sits on your account forever until you burn it, or is this something that you can transfer? Okay, and lastly, we have functionality for managing and sharing your certificates. There's a QR code, which right now takes you to this URL. The owner can burn it. A certificate has fixed data and mutable data that the author can update at any time. And this is what it looks like. There's also some search like that. So let's begin with the first specific example. For this one, I am logged in under a different account, and let's pretend that I am a small business which has suffered economically due to the COVID epidemic and the quarantine, and I want to promote my business by issuing coupons. So I can register as a user, and for an example, I will use what was one of my favorite restaurants when I lived in Iowa, the famous Hamburg Inn of Iowa City. So I filled in this simple form, and I will register as an issuer. This is the Hamburg Inn storefront, and that allows me to issue coupons. So let's call these coupons the post-COVID promotional coupon. And I think a great way to do this would be to give these to all my followers on voice. because people on voice have already crossed the technical barrier of joining an EOS blockchain. What fields should these coupons have? Let's see, we might need a serial number. So let's give this one 004. And it may need an expiration date. And I can add some data that I can update in the future. For example, the status of the coupon, it can initially be active or new, and after people use it, it can be used. And let's give this coupon to the account New Dr. Dan. And it is as simple as that. Example number 2, I am logged in under a different account. I have registered as a medical school, and I have filled out this form to issue a diploma to New Dr. Dan. So congratulations, New Dr. Dan. Here is your medical school diploma. Now, this is a very ambitious use case because medical schools are deeply entrenched in their current methods and very prestigious and unlikely to adopt new technologies. But you can imagine something similar for the whole chain of certifications and credentials. Maybe a certification for lab technician training, or certification that you are authorized to administer a certain test. All of these things can be done very easily through the Kyros Certificate Hub. I am now logged in as New Dr. Dan from the previous examples, and you can see the newly issued coupon and medical school diploma here. And example number 3 will be the local issuance of some medical reports. So New Dr. Dan has opened up a clinic, Neighborhood Clinic 123. And let's see here. And the doctor will issue certificates. Let's call it medical screening and whatever else. Let's throw a visual in there, a picture for the report. And let's say that these are COVID antibody tests. Antibody. And it is positive, which is a good thing. And let's add a date of the screening. And I'm putting these in mutable data, the data that the neighborhood clinic will have authority to update, because let's say this works just like a proof that you can take with you, and it can get updated periodically, and there can be some fixed data too. Now, there is an interesting problem here of privacy. So, of course, if I issue this medical report as is, everyone will be able to see and connect the username. Let's make it test user 111. Everyone will be able to connect the username to the report. We've thought about privacy, and I think the best way to implement it is not necessarily on the certificate side, but just give every authority a way to do privacy themselves. For example, for details of this report or for other health reports, you can just refer people to some kind of portal, myclinic.org, and add some kind of tracker at the end of it. And then if people want access to the private data, they would have to go here to my portal that I manage at the clinic, where I make sure that everyone who should have access to this data gets it, and people who should not have access to this data do not get it. So that's one of several schemes how you can build privacy into these certificates. And let's issue this. And that is example number 3, medical certificates. So for the final example, I am logged in as test user 111. This was the recipient of the medical certificate in the previous example. Let's say this user wants to become an independent arbiter of objectivity. So one thing that the COVID-19 epidemic raised to the surface is once again igniting the debate about information and propaganda and accurate information. So this doesn't solve the problem, but it addresses it. And it addresses it by empowering people to become sort of rating agencies and then competing in the marketplace of ideas to establish a reputation. And then maybe you could issue your sort of seal of approval to all of the top content creators on Voice who are interested in having this public, highly visible rating from you. And there are different ways to architect this. One way to do it might be to issue certificates in which accuracy, completeness, and rigor are all mutable, and they get rated, let's say, every month. And so they'll display these badges on their voice accounts or on their websites, and a user will be able to click on the badge and see the last rating that you've given them. Many ways to architect it. It's really up to the issuer, but that is what I think is the most interesting example of the bunch. So thank you for considering those examples. There are probably other use cases which we haven't even thought of. In summary, we want to change the world in three ways. Firstly, we want to simply provide better credentials, driver's licenses that are harder to counterfeit, educational diplomas that are easier to verify. Secondly, we want to provide useful tools and put them in the hands of everyday people. Think of the example of the restaurant who now had an easy way to promote business by issuing coupons. And third, we want to democratize authority. We want to give upstarts the ability to declare themselves as credential authorities and then compete for public recognition of their stamp of approval or their diplomas or whatever else. The design principles are keeping it simple, both simple to use and simple to understand. We want to be compatible with any existing technology so that you could easily integrate on your website, on your social media. You could, in your certificate, you could link people to a portal that you've created. And lastly, this is sort of the result of the other two design principles. We want to ignite the user's imagination. So we want to impose relatively little structure so that users can customize things to fit it to their use cases. Thank you for your attention. Stay safe and stay strong.